Content warning for racism.
Action, excitement,
Horror, romance,
thrills and chills,
swords and sorcery,
rockets and ray guns, a dizzying panoply of the strange and impossible from the darkest depths of the human imagination. What mad universe encompasses such tales as these? Join us as we bear witness to the sweeping sprawl of all the history that never was and all the futures that could yet be. It's adventure as you like it on What Mad Universe?
Jules Verne, one of the fathers of modern science fiction, beloved the world over for his, pardon my French, voyage extraordinaire adventure novels, including The Journey to the Center of the Earth, From the Earth to the Moon, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and Around the World in 80 Days. But we're not talking about him. Instead, we're going to talk about a silly little parody of his work, Albert Robita's The Very Extraordinary Voyages of Saturnin Farandoul in the world's 5 or 6 continents, and in the countries known and even unknown to Monsieur Jules Verne, from 1879, often shortened, for obvious reasons, to The Adventures of Saturnin Farandoul. In this epic novel, our hero, named Fortuné Gracieux Saturnin Farandoul, or Saturnin Farandoul for short, is stranded as a baby on a Pacific island inhabited only by monkeys, who decide to take him in and raise him as their own. This is decades before Tarzan, by the way. Saturnin eventually finds his way to civilization and has thrilling adventures on every continent on Earth, as well as a few places beyond. He fights pirates, conquers Australia with an army of monkeys, becomes a general in the South American Civil War, travels to Saturn on the back of a comet, returns the King of Siam's stolen white elephant, and travels to the North Pole by airship only to return by sailing on a shoal of herring. In his travels, he meets up with several of Jules Verne's protagonists, Captain Nemo from 20,000 Leagues, Phileas Fogg from Around the World in 80 Days, Hector Servadac from Off on a Comet, Mikhail Strogoff from The Courier of the Tsar, and John Hatteras from The Adventures of Captain Hatteras. The book is a rollicking and hilarious adventure that, dated elements like racism aside, sometimes feels more like a modern steampunk pastiche along the lines of the Walt Newton universe or the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen than a genuine cultural artifact from the era. Welcome to What Mad Universe. I'm Philip Rice, and with me is Adam Prosser.
Hello.
Now, why are we doing this? Because you definitely haven't heard of this book. I came across it some years ago. I was looking for books set on Saturn because I was doing a sort of filling out what different planets of the universe look like, or the solar system look like in my own fiction and art. And I came across this book and I read the description and I just couldn't believe it was real. I mean, he conquers Australia with an army of monkeys. That's a bizarre thing to put in a book, and it's especially bizarre for something that came out in 1879.
Yeah.
So I instantly got it and I read it, and I've been sort of obsessed with it. It's not high literature, but it's really weird.
Well, it is. It's a parody, right?
Yeah, it's a parody. And I think it does most of what it sets out to do in terms of what, the themes and stuff. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
But so I sort of have a joke, an in-joke with myself, and I'll post on Twitter, acting like this is a really well-known novel that has a big fan base, and that by posting about it, I'm just
giving the fans
pandering,
what they like.
pandering to a huge fan base, and that where's the movie series, and where's why doesn't the Macy's Day Parade have a Saturnin Farandoul balloon?
Are they gonna remake Saturnin Farandoul again? Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Which is your favorite Saturnin Farandoul? Chris whatever? Or
Yeah. Chris
Henry
Pong
Cavill?
or yeah. Or was it back when Kirk Douglas played him in the
Yeah.
50s? Yes.
There is actually a movie, but we'll get into that.
Yes. Yeah.
So, you're the first person that I've actually gotten to read this thing. What did you think
I have
of it?
to, Phil. It's my job.
Yeah.
No, it's really. I mean, it's certainly. It draws you in for sure. It's not like a lot of ponderous 19th century books. It is long, like a lot of 19th century books. But yeah, it's definitely like it's the pulp thing where it's always one thing after another and all the crazy
it's very
adventures.
episodic.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, by design, right? It's literally based around. There's there's 5 segments, each based around Saturnin visiting one of the 5, counting the Americas as one, inhabited continents.
Yeah.
So it's like it starts in Oceania and then goes, and then he goes to the Americas and then Africa, then Asia, and finally Europe.
Yeah.
So and every segment has 10 chapters. So he was obviously working on the structure pretty carefully.
Yeah, it was serialized, so it wasn't all put out. It wasn't all written out beforehand. So there are some. It sort of changes as it goes along. It's I felt. And I think the translator in the Brian Stableford in the introduction felt as well. It's a little mean-spirited at first,
right?
In some ways, like his first love interest just dies, and the villains often get killed brutally usually by fate, but sometimes by Saturnin himself.
Yeah.
And it seems to taper off after a particularly violent episode in part 2.
Right. Well, even in Africa, though, there's MacLachnavor, the Scottish guy, who's kind of a fool, and he doesn't die horribly, but he's
but I mean, he doesn't even take revenge on the final villain, Captain Hatteras.
Right.
And that's another thing. A lot of these Jules Verne characters are treated as villains.
Yeah. Except Captain Nemo, who was kind of a villain, and he becomes pretty purely heroic in this one.
Yeah.
So, which may have been part of the joke or whatever, but every section features one of Jules Verne's characters as well as he goes around. I was surprised how short the Captain Nemo was, given he's probably the most well-known character.
Well, it was at the time, Jules Verne was still very, all of his books were very well read, as opposed to just a few of them now.
Yeah.
And I should mention, I'm not really into Jules Verne very much. He never really spoke to me much. I read some children's versions of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and I've read some of his stuff, but I'm more of an H.G. Wells fan, I guess. It's more fantastical. Right. I find Jules Verne is sort of hard sci-fi for the time, and that it doesn't age as well.
No, exactly. Well, yeah, Jules Verne famously, he fought with H.G. Wells over that exact thing, and if I recall correctly, it was H.G. Wells had to create the Cavorite for the what's
Jules.
It called?
For going to the moon.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, Jules Verne heard about that and he said, Where is this Cavorite? Show me this Cavorite!" Because it didn't exist, so it shouldn't be in science fiction,
Yeah, but he had them shooting to the moon by shooting out of a giant cannon. Well,
I think the logic there is at least he knew that these gravitational, theoretically, it is possible to fire someone to the moon.
It would
in
kill
a cannon.
them, though.
No, it's true, obviously. But his point is that Cavorite being one of the early examples of phlogiston or unobtainium, if you like, which they had to create to make the story make sense, as opposed to, I used only real physics, which didn't, as you say, it would kill them. But, it's at least, that was something apparently Jules Verne felt very strongly about, because, again, it was, quote, hard sci-fi, unquote.
Mm-hmm.
Which continues to this day. And then into the 40s and 50s, there were people who were like, sci-fi has to be nuts and bolts, real sci-fi.
And I think that stuff doesn't age well.
No, it doesn't at all.
It's immediately found out to be fraudulent.
Right, exactly.
Well, stuff that takes place in the year 3000 that has, anti-gravity and, you can't disprove that because it's nonsense in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And although, Jules Verne's work, it does have a certain charm to it.
And a lot of the Captain Nemo is a great character,
right?
And I'm just saying, I'm not as into him as you'd think I would be, considering most of the stuff I read.
Right. Yeah, no, actually, it's interesting, now I think about it, if I recall, Jules Verne had a secret method of energy production, which in the 50s movie that Disney made, they actually implied it was atomic power, that he discovered atomic power in the 19th century. But in the book, it's just, I have a secret method of propulsion that I won't tell to anyone because it's my proprietary secret. So
yeah, that makes sense for Captain Nemo as a character, but at the same time, it's a little hypocritical of Jules Verne.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. He completely did the same thing. He was yelling at H.G. Wells about. But anyway, so this Robita guy must have been. It's clearly he set out to make fun of Jules Verne, i.e.
But he also liked him.
Yeah. No,
like he obviously had affection for Jules Verne's work.
Yeah. Well, he kind of dumps on his heroes though. Like.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The narrator often says that. Because in this universe, Jules Verne was a person who wrote about real people.
Right.
So in this, Jules Verne just believed these people's stories firsthand, and they were actually jerks in real life.
Right.
But Jules Verne just wrote down what they said firsthand. So
yeah. Well, when we talked about Vampire City, we mentioned how because that's also basically commenting on a famous author of the time who's in that case somewhat forgotten, Anne Radcliffe, and the story was in some ways parodying her style.
Yeah.
Like they'd give her dialogue that was kind of overblown, and it's a reference to her own writing.
Mm-hmm.
And that feels like he's doing, this whole thing is him doing that with Jules Verne, essentially. There's a few points where it feels a bit sarcastic.
Oh yeah, it's very
about
sarcastic.
Jules Verne.
Yeah.
That's notable word. Like Phileas Fogg especially is just made out to be an awful person in this version. I don't know I've actually never read the original novel, but
I've seen the movie.
I got the impression he was more heroic in the novel. He wasn't intended to be a jerk.
There's also a gag with Phileas Fogg has apparently in the novel he rescues a woman.
Right.
So in this he has a retinue of 372 women that he's rescued.
Right.
Because they flock to him trying to be rescued.
And then later he basically suggests that he was going to sell them at the next. Like it's pretty.
He comes
pretty
across
harsh
as a
on
jerk,
Phileas Fogg. I also like the joke in the Phileas Fogg Passepartout, his man servant, I guess.
Yeah.
And he says, I know we were going to come back okay because I left the gas on when I left.
Oh, so because that was in the original book, apparently.
It was in the original book. Okay.
So this time he left, he just left the stove on before, but this time he left all the stoves in his house on. And
right.
He had to escape to not have to pay the gas bill.
Right, exactly.
In this story. So,
yes. Yeah. So that was in the original Jules Verne that he left the gas on.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
It might not have been.
That actually seems a little whimsical for Jules Verne. That's what I'm saying. He wasn't a very whimsical writer.
Okay,
so,
I might be wrong, but
Anyway, that's just interesting.
That seemed, but it's so it takes a lot of Verne's concepts and just makes them ridiculous. Like the comet that that's a ridiculous concept in the first place, that a comet comes to Earth and sucks some people up, and but in this case it hurtles towards Saturn in no time flat, and they wind up on Saturn. But that we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Breathing in outer space. Yeah.
So to the Tarzan element, there's no evidence that Edgar Rice Burroughs had ever heard of this book, and he didn't speak French, I don't think, and this wasn't translated until recently. In the last 20 years, 15 years or so.
Right.
So it's only been in French for the longest time. So, or I guess it would have been in Italian as well, because there was an Italian movie. But yeah.
Yeah. That's 1913.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So Robita was known in his time. Like he wasn't as obscure as he is now.
Mm-hmm.
But this was his first novel, Farandoul, and it obviously. It's very imaginative and stuff. So it's obvious. It reads sort of like a first novel.
Yeah.
It's all your ideas.
Well, and also kind of cashing in on Jules Verne. Let's face it. It was a parody, but Sorry, I just want to go back to the monkeys and the Tarzan element for a second.
Yeah.
Because don't forget, the big influence on Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan was probably Rudyard Kipling, Mowgli in the Jungle Book. So then there's the question of, did Rudyard Kipling know about this story? Because if you remember, he has kind of monkeys forming a civilization that's kind of a twisted parody of humanity in his version as well.
The foreword to by the translator to this book does mention there was a previous book about a man who infiltrates a society of monkeys
Right.
and becomes their leader by dressing up as a gorilla.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that might have been the inspiration for this one.
Yeah, I think that was. I think there were real stories, whether they were true or not, of a child. Like Mowgli is literally the child raised by wolves, which
Yeah.
has been an archetype for a while.
Yeah.
And I think the idea of, oh, what if a man was, in a monkey society? I think that was sort of the thing that had been patted around as a cliche, if not an actual story element.
Yeah, there's a story. I haven't read it yet, but it's about an ape who learns to talk like an actual ape, but he's introduced to society, learns to talk, and actually becomes Prime Minister of England. I really want to read that for that element, but
Yeah. But anyway, sorry. Yes, yours.
yeah. So Rabida was known in his time, but it was mostly for his 20th century series. He wrote starting with a novel just called The 20th Century. It's about as long as this one is, and it's filled with illustrations, as this one is, by Rabida, who was a caricaturist, and they're very whimsical and fun illustrations. But the 20th Century is set in the far-off future of 1952, written in 1882. And it predicts technological changes and social changes and things, often correctly. I mean, it predicts the women's suffrage, women in the workplace, though it's a lot more established than the actual 1950s were, because it's like, it's just expected that women work in this story. So, and the main character is Helene, who's sort of old-fashioned. She's just kind of not good at anything, and she can't find her place in the world because she's sort of a throwback, I guess.
Okay.
And she's the story is about her trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life, and then it goes off the rails at the end when they build a sixth continent in Polynesia. So
okay,
or
they
in the Pacific
build
Ocean.
a sixth continent. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's called Helenia.
Fair enough. But that's in the first book, or that's a series?
Yeah, that's the first book.
Yeah, okay.
And he wrote one called War in the 20th Century, which sort of predicted World War I in a lot of elements. As Saturnin Farandoul also has a section where they go to highly mechanized war, but it's very comical.
Right.
And this
they
is
use
the same.
chloroform bombs in Saturnin
This is
Farandoul.
the same. I mean, these are all comedies.
Right.
Rabida was very whimsical in his stories, but they have a sharp satirical edge in a lot of places. And he was apparently a pacifist. So all the war stuff was him sort of satirizing war and saying how horrible this all is, and sort of making it over the top for intentionally to sort of point out how ridiculous it is.
Yeah.
And he apparently got typecast and that sort of thing, and he was invited to illustrate books that were sort of similar future war stuff, but like glorifying it.
Oh.
And he didn't appreciate that.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting. The as with Gulliver's Travels, I feel like the first section may be the one that kind of resonates the most with people of this book, and that's the one where first he's raised by monkeys on a tropical island, although he's kind of blurry on the distinction between monkeys and apes.
Yeah, the translator uses monkeys, but they're called apes in the original French, but they have tails.
Right.
So.
And he says they're halfway between, orangutans and chimpanzees or something, but then they clearly have tails as well. So, but anyway, he's raised by monkeys, he leaves. He sails off to become a mariner because he doesn't fit into monkey society. Then he meets a girl he falls in love with. She gets eaten by a whale, which then goes to Australia and ends up in an aquarium. And the director of the aquarium sees her emerge and falls in love with her and refuses to let her go. So Saturnin invades Australia with an army of monkeys.
Yep.
This is all in the first segment of the book, not even the entire book.
And you skipped over the pirates and Captain Nemo. So.
There's pirates. There's a lot of stuff happening. That's right. There's a whole encounter with pirates. But the big thing is that he literally invades Australia successfully. Again, it's just to get his woman back. But when he invades Australia, he starts saying, I'm going to set up the ideal society with, as he calls them, bimanes, which are humans with 2 hands, and quadrumanes, which are monkeys with 4 hands, in which they can all live peacefully and stuff like that. It's hard not to see that as kind of a 19th century leftist, possibly socialist dream of, if you say he was a pacifist, I'm kind of thinking that might have been what his politics were like.
Okay.
Because it's sort of, oh yeah, we're going to build a utopian society anyway.
And then it falls apart because England sends in beer and prostitutes for the monkeys.
Yes.
Which is very
yeah,
weird.
Again, this is all, but and that's almost just like a tweak on exactly the kind of thing anti-imperialists have been saying for years of like, yeah, that's what happens. You try to set up a good society and the imperialists come in and destroy it from within. Whether he's mocking that idea or going along with it in a silly way is somewhat debatable. But it is literally like he's the king of Australia by the end of the first segment. Yeah. And then he's deposed and then he loses it.
Yeah.
And has to go on. And then he decides he's going to become a capitalist. Like he explicitly says, well, now I'm going to become a capitalist and start a big business and be successful.
And they become Mormons.
Yeah, they become, yeah.
Yeah, this is carried over into the 20th century book where England is converted to Mormonism. Because America has been largely taken over by the Chinese and the Germans, different parts of America. So people of Utah sort of fled to England, and England is now Mormon capital. And Robita seemed to find Mormons hilarious because I'm sure this came up in other novels that I haven't read yet, but just the whole polygamy thing.
It's interesting because famously the first Sherlock Holmes stories is about Mormons and how I believe it's anti-Mormon. It portrays them as diabolical. And this book also is pretty down on Mormons, at least.
Well, early on they were, it was very cultish.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, there's perfectly nice Mormons and all that, but
yes. Well, it was clearly being written by, regardless of your feelings on Mormons.
Yeah.
There seems to have been some 19th century novels
that
were definitely writing about the Mormon menace almost, even though it was in another continent that they were never going to deal with. It seemed to be in the water or something in the 19th century where everyone wanted to write about these weirdo Mormons who were going to marry all our women or something. I don't know what they were afraid of, but it was a thing.
In the 20th century, if you're caught traveling around in England without a wife, you get arrested and you have to marry somebody.
We have the store wife for you.
Yeah. So they become Mormons, and then they're chased out by a jealous Mormon who is apparently a real person.
Yeah, Brigham Young.
Yeah.
He was like the head of the Mormon church for a crucial period in their history, but I don't know.
So Brigham Young who's a character in this story, betrays them, and he escapes capture, and he gets taken in by Apaches, Native Americans, who are going to kill him, but then they discover that he's really good at body painting.
Right.
So they take him in, and he becomes high up and falls in love with the chief's love interest. There's... Yeah.
Don't keep going or you're going to describe the entire whole plot. It's going to it goes crazier and crazier.
But, so they...
There's a recurring thread in the plot where he falls in with, a race and that he's not that he's an outsider to. It's always kind of a racist depiction of whatever.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate, especially the Africa section. Gets really, really.
To say.
Other stories that he wrote one of his later ones, A Student of 1950, which is sort of a parody of English schoolboy novels. One of the main characters is actually an African boy named Alfred Kufra, I think, and he's the son of a Congolese, or from the Congo, notary.
Okay.
And it says Africa has been heavily industrialized. It's not as advanced as France, so he's sort of like one of the viewpoint characters.
Okay.
So he's like a normal kid from art,
So he's kind of observing our culture from another culture. Is that kind of the idea?
The idea is that Africa by that time is like, I think the idea was like France was when Robita was writing it.
Right. So that makes him a viewpoint character for a 19th century.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he doesn't treat them as savages there. Like he's never seen a rhinoceros or anything. Sure. So either he became less racist over time, which is certainly possible because he was like 70 by the time he wrote that. So,
I mean, by the standards of a 19th century novel, this is a racist novel, but by the standards of the 19th century, it's actually pretty tame in terms of racism.
Yeah,
in some
it's not
ways.
Lovecraft where he clearly just hates black people. It's
Right.
more like he's banking on stereotypes
Right.
that are really unfortunate, and I'm not saying they're okay in any way, but it's still like there's levels of it.
Yeah, well, it's almost like he's just using all the popular cliches.
Yeah, like
I'm
they're
sure he's never been
cannibals
to
and-
these
yeah.
places. Yeah, exactly. The idea of what it's going to be like, and of course, but it's also just I want to have a crazy travelogue of like everyone's crazy ideas of these different countries, basically.
Yeah.
And it tends, as I was just saying, it was. Every story tends to be Saturnin falls into this other culture. He gets often revered for a while. Then something happens that makes them want to kill him or throw him in jail or something.
Yeah.
And he has to escape. Sometimes he has to go on a quest to clear his good name or whatever. But it kind of does repeat the same plot about 3 or 4 times throughout the book.
But
with
in
Native
different ways, I
Americans.
think.
Yeah.
So in the North American section, he meets up with Phileas Fogg, who's traveling with 300 and something women.
Right.
And
Because he keeps saving women.
they
everywhere.
found a town. They chase out some beavers from a beaver-built village. It's called and they call it Beaver Town. It's an actual city built by beavers.
Right.
Beaver Town, by the way, is very similar to Beaverton, which is a Canadian sort of version of the Onion. I found that a bit amusing.
Yeah.
So he gets in a fight with Phileas Fogg, and they decide to go to war with each other, or a duel with each other. But because they're gentlemen, they have to duel on a grand scale. So they both draw lots and pick a side in a Nicaraguan civil war, which
Right.
never actually happened apparently.
Right.
But and they pick random sides, based on drawing lots, like I said, and they become generals on both sides and mechanized, they say to the last drop of Nicaraguan blood. And it's very over the top,
Yeah.
these are horrible people at this point.
Well, apparently that's the idea. There was a lot of the South American stuff was him commenting on America, but just placing.
Yeah,
like,
that's true too.
It's basically the Civil War, but
Yeah.
he said it in Nicaragua for some reason.
Yeah.
It's almost Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Let's
Yeah.
go someplace like that.
And this section is very similar to a lot of the 20th century stuff with outlandish inventions used for warfare, like the giant vacuum cleaners
Right.
to suck up soldiers,
Right.
and chloroform bombs, like you said, underwater battles where they're riding on top of swordfishes,
Right.
and swordfish, and aerial battles in balloons, very very steampunk.
Right. Yeah, the balloon battles come in for a while.
Yeah. And Phileas Fogg gets killed brutally. So that's kind of weird, killing off another author's character. By the way, these are like Jules Verne was alive.
Right. Yeah. It's at the same time as Jules Verne.
Yeah,
basically.
like a little bit after probably Jules Verne's height, but Jules Verne was still alive, still writing, and he apparently didn't mind. He apparently found it amusing. So,
Yeah, okay.
But this was without permission, like written, like it would be like
Yeah.
it's like professionally published fan fiction with the original names of
Yeah.
the characters. It's weird.
It's definitely fanfic for sure.
Yeah.
Which has been going on forever. But it's funny that Jules Verne thought it was funny and didn't care, because we were talking about how that other guy in who wrote Vampire City was angry that people kept ripping off his stuff.
Well,
and-
this was another French person. so-
right, exactly, yeah. So it's kind of funny. But I mean, one of the things about the novel is just, and then so there's the North American section, then there's the Africa section, which we can skip over. It's kind of some of it. Well, hey, no, don't worry, I'm getting there. wait. There's the section that what you'd expect from Africa, which is kind of racist and everything. But then suddenly he ends up in outer space.
Yep.
At the end, and that's, as you say, they all get sucked up by a comet into outer space.
Yep.
Breathing around in outer space, it doesn't seem to cause them problems.
Well, it's from the Verne novel, and that's hard sci-fi. So
So they didn't realize there was no air in outer space.
I
at that
think
point?
the idea was there was an atmosphere around the comet or something. I don't know. They didn't know that wouldn't hold, but whatever.
So then they go to Saturn, actual Saturn.
Yeah.
Saturnin is on Saturn. I don't know if that's actually supposed to be a joke that he goes to Saturn.
I'm not sure.
And his name is Saturnin, but they
Yeah.
never call attention to it.
So this And the illustrations for the Saturnians, or whatever you want to call them, are cool sort of creature designs. I think they're very Victorian in some ways, but they have like elephant trunks and wings and flippers.
Yeah, they have long noses they have long trunk noses, and then they have kind of fans on the end of the noses.
Yeah,
and they have like.
And there's males, and then there's 7 varieties of female.
Right.
So
which come in 7 different colors.
Yeah.
Which he never really says what color the males are, but
the
females are like, there's the blue ones and the purple ones and the yellow ones and the white ones and the green ones.
Yeah. So I don't know what the commentary there is.
It was very weird and abrupt. They go there for like 2 chapters and then they're back on Earth again all of a sudden.
But I mean, I don't know what that specific idea, like what if that was trying to parody anything or just be weird. But
yeah. Well, it's kind of like, it's almost disappointing because I feel like after that, the novel kind of loses steam.
Yeah. Once again, the foreword says, and I agree with this, the novel, he seems to be running out of ideas as it goes along.
Yeah. Well,
the next part is about him trying to find the king of Siam's stolen white elephant.
Yeah.
He travels around Asia, and he keeps getting imprisoned by various places. And they even say, "Oh, he's imprisoned again."
Yes. Like that's where it really starts to become. He goes and meets some people. They throw him in prison. He gets sentenced to death, and then he escapes. And then he goes to the next place, and then he gets caught and sentenced to death.
Yeah.
Like over and over again.
And the last, I think we can skip over most of the Asian stuff.
But I do actually like that there's a through line for the Asian thing, which is just he's trying to rescue this elephant.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of good that there's a plot to that point, which was sometimes missing from the earlier segments.
Yeah.
But that elephant, boy, does that elephant get around, because it goes from like Korea to Russia in like a couple paragraphs at one point.
I forget this part. Does the elephant's nose break off?
The elephant almost freezes to death in Russia. As they're trying to revive it, its nose breaks off. Its trunk, or part of its trunk, shatters and breaks off. But then they're able to revive it and save it, and apparently it's okay.
Yeah.
I didn't.
At one point, they try to paint a regular elephant white, and
to get away with it, so they can escape. Well, I did like the one of all the many sort of executions and everything. I did like the fact that it's in Siam, I think. They go in and they go into the king's harem, which you're not supposed to do. Obviously, that's
because they're trying to find the king, so they
right.
Because the chief of police or whatever is the one who actually stole the elephant.
Right.
He's trying to stop them from finding it.
Right.
So he is barring them from seeing the king, so they try to sneak in and
and they end up in the harem.
Yeah.
And then the thing is like by going into the harem, they're sentenced to death, I think 36 times for every time. But then the idea is no one can go in to arrest them, or else they'll have to be executed as well, which is kind of funny.
There's a Mexican standoff sort of thing.
Yeah, which is
Siamese standoff. I don't know.
Yeah, that was kind of entertaining. But yeah, then they kind of repeat it over and over, and same thing happens in China, more or less.
Yeah,
and the same thing happens in Japan, more or less.
Yeah, at one point he disguises himself as a Japanese man and said he had. I can't remember. He was trying to look like a foreigner.
Yeah, he gets mistaken. There's a Japanese lord, a daimyo, who's got to. He's had bad luck with those business dealings, and the oracles tell him that if his wife betrays him, or if his wife deceives him, that once that happens, all his luck will turn around. But he doesn't have a wife, so he arranges to get married, and then so he'll have a wife to deceive him. So the thing, and as they're planning to get married, Saturnin and his gang show up in samurai armor covering their faces, and they mistake him for the daimyo, so he ends up marrying the woman instead, and the guy's furious, and then they kind of go, wait a minute, is this deception? But it's like, no, because you weren't technically married yet, so it doesn't count, basically. So, but then he realized, wait a minute, I could get married to her, and then she'll want to go off with him, and that'll be a deception. Anyway, so that was kind of funny.
I'm not saying there wasn't amusing things in it, but I thought that section was a little less entertaining overall.
Yeah,
in terms of it was a little repetitive. Then the last one is a little bit dull. It has some funny parts, but he wants to travel to the North Pole, and he goes there by airship. But the governor of the North Pole sends him a letter threatening him, and it turns out that this is Captain Hatteras from the Jules Verne novel, who traveled to the North Pole, and And
I hadn't heard of that one.
That apparently ends with him just being missing. So this is sort of continuing on from that. But it also adds a complication that he had a wife who wanted a divorce and was going after him for the divorce.
Right.
And this was entirely invented for this version.
Yeah.
So they arrive at the North Pole and they fight with Hatteras and whatnot and they escape, but their ship is sinking. But then there's a giant shoal of herring, just massive, like, and they just sort of are able to stand on it.
Yeah.
And they set up like a newspaper at one point, traveling home. And
yeah.
the red herring.
They all travel, and that's the thing. It goes on. That bit goes on for way too long.
Yeah.
But it is funny that like they're rescued in the Arctic Ocean by standing on a shoal of herring so big it basically becomes an island or a ship that travels them south, and they can eat it while surviving. And then they set up.
They start depleting it after a while.
Yeah, exactly. And other animals start depleting it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's kind of funny, but it goes on for too long. And the other thing is, this is supposed to be the Europe section, and they're in the North Pole for most of it. So
yeah, I think Europe would have been boring because the readers would have been Europeans.
I guess so. Yeah, and I guess it's supposed to be adventures in crazy foreign lands. And you can't have that. I feel like they could have done something in Europe, but anyway, it does feel like he was just doing the obligatory. Okay, I got to Europe. I said I was going to do all the continents, so I got to do Europe. It kind of feels that way. So we'll go to the North Pole. But,
and then it ends with him. The final girl is Olga something.
Yeah, she comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, because he keeps meeting love interests and they keep sort of separating. The first one dies.
Yeah,
but after that, they sort of keep marrying somebody else or whatever.
That brings up. Do you mind if we go to the movie?
Oh, I just want to finish.
Okay.
So it ends with a bit about nihilists.
Yeah.
Instead of anarchists, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
And this shows up in the 20th century as well. Nihilists had attacked Russia in the 20th century sometime, and actually set off a series of bombs that sinks the whole landmass into the ocean.
Okay.
So Russia's gone, and by
right again, you've got the political things, because you're right. It's obviously meant to be a stand-in for like anarchists, but ridiculous because they're not. This is the Big Lebowski, apparently. Yeah, we believe in nothing. Yeah.
Say what you will about the tenets of National Socialism, but at least it's an ethos.
Yeah. But that guy, that's probably what he was doing. He didn't want to bring in an actual political group.
Yeah.
So there's kind of, like I say, there's both at the beginning and the end, it kind of feels like he's dancing around real politics that were maybe too heavy for a goofy adventure story or something. But yeah, it's true. Like he literally gets to almost the last chapter and he's like, wait, Saturnin Farandoul doesn't have a real love interest. So he suddenly meets a girl in Russia who's a nihilist who sets him free because they think they're nihilists. They get arrested for being nihilists. Then she's like, no, I'm a nihilist. I'll set you free. She's like, okay. But then he's like, oh, I like this girl. And he marries her. And they go back to his island and live happily ever after. Right.
And Brian Stableford, once again the translator, has a theory that the whole thing's about Saturnin. He originally, he doesn't fit into monkey society, so he goes out to humans, but he fits in. He sort of adapts too well to human society and becomes sort of a parody, like a grander scale version of everything wrong with humanity.
Right.
And then eventually starts mellowing out as the story goes on.
Right.
And by the end, he's had enough of it and he wants to return home.
Right, exactly.
To a simpler sort of...
He appreciates what he had because he started out restless and wanting to go home, and now he's like... Yeah, and they don't hit that... Robida doesn't hit that too hard as like a heavy note, but that is kind of the thing you come away with it. It's like, I'm sick of humans, I'm going to go back and live with the monkeys. Yeah. Which is, again, like Tarzan, basically.
Yeah.
Again, as you say, he probably wasn't an influence on Tarzan, but it's funny how that echoes the basic story of Tarzan. So... But as you say, there was a movie in 1913.
And I came across this in a weird way because it's not on the... I mean, there's no Wikipedia page for this book, but there is one for Robida, but it's not on there. I actually came across it entirely by coincidence. I had seen a silent movie called Philibus, which was really fun. We might talk about that in the future if we go into movies at some point.
Yeah.
But it's about a sky pirate who's a female who disguises herself as a man, and she has a female love interest at one point. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting gender-wise. But anyway, so I was looking for other Italian silent movies, and one of them that I saw on Wikipedia was The Adventures of Saturnino Farandoul.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, what?
Yeah.
because this book that I'm always talking about is as a movie adaptation, and it's on YouTube.
Right.
And you can find translations of the text segments. So yeah, we watched it. What did you think of it, first of all?
Well, it's funny. It's actually, in as much as what they had to work with in 1913, it's a well done adaptation. They know what to cut. I mean, there are issues, but I think they make some story changes that improve it a lot.
Yeah, his first love interest survives.
Yeah, she's with him throughout the entire movie, and that works so much better, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
With her being throughout, and then they end up together on the island. And because she gets to play the role of some of the other females who, like the woman who rescues him from jail in Siam, is there. They cut out the whole North Pole segment. They obviously identified that as the most boring part, unfortunately. Yeah. And possibly the budget might not have allowed for it either.
Well, they did the airship battle.
Yeah, they do some other stuff, which looked cool.
Yeah, that was really impressive.
Yeah, it's got those great sort of old school effects, but it's
very
really
Méliès, Georges Méliès. From, not quite up to that level necessarily, but you know.
But clearly Méliès was clearly an inspiration for all that stuff.
Yeah.
And what was the other decision that they made that I thought was good?
Well, it's out of order.
Yeah, they don't do it in the same order as it was.
Yeah, and so it ends with the big airship battle thing. So that's sort of interesting.
Right. Yeah.
One problem I had with it, Phileas Fogg comes out of nowhere in the movie.
Yeah, Phileas Fogg.
It just the first time he appears is actually a title card saying the betrayal of Phileas Fogg.
Right. Yeah,
so maybe we watched a cut down version.
That's right. Well, a lot of the silent movies I think got cut down or missing reels or stuff, and that might be.
I don't know, but it has most of the stuff in it.
Right.
It even has a set for the Beaver Town. So
right. Yeah,
it hits on a lot of the story.
Yeah, it's as I was saying online, it's like it's weirdly faithful to the story in many ways. You're expecting all kinds of crazy, like if you look at some of the really early versions of The Wizard of Oz before the famous one that were silent, but like the degree to which they changed the story sometimes would be ridiculous.
Well, I watched
the
Alita or the Queen of Mars, the silent movie.
Right.
That's based on a book, which we'll probably be discussing in a future episode. But the book is actually set on, like, they actually go to Mars.
Right.
In the movie, that's a dream.
Well, yeah, that was a thing with silent movies that they didn't like. It was often
especially with
on.
the Russian, yeah.
Russians, but even in like the 30s, there was a period in North America where it wasn't that you couldn't portray it; it's just that people kind of frowned on the fantastical.
This also doesn't have the Saturn sequence, but that would have been impossible to. Well, not impossible.
I don't know. I mean, Georges Méliès went to the moon.
Fair
enough,
but it would have been harder.
Right. But anyway, it is actually a surprisingly interesting little silent movie. Not that I don't like silent movies, but that's like I say, you can see to read the book and then watch it. That's one of the early examples.
Yeah,
of
my
Hollywood.
Dad didn't understand he didn't read the book, and he didn't. He watched the movie with me. He didn't understand what was going on because it moves too quickly.
Yeah, they definitely jump. They're kind of doing the highlights version of the book in many ways.
And it starts off by the famous book by Albert Robita. So, I mean, I know he was better known in his time, but I think that's going too far for any. But
in Italy, maybe he was huge. Yeah. I don't know. But because it is an Italian movie, as you say. But you can definitely, it's interesting to look at the choices they made, and you're like, oh, they made some good choices adapting that. That was kind of cool. But
I was at one point planning on adapting this book as a comic before I realized that it's already so filled with illustrations.
Yeah, right.
That would be kind of pointless. But I was thinking of changes, and I think the Leaving My Sora Alive would have been, I think, what I would have ended up doing possibly. So, that was a good choice, definitely.
Yeah, just the image.
It's less mean-spirited, I guess.
Yeah. They get the image of Mysora in a diving bell being held hostage in an aquarium is a good image. There's lots of great images in the story, which the movie makes good use of, I think.
Yeah.
The Beaverton and the Siamese elephant. Anyway.
I also read Robita's last story.
Mm-hmm.
This is his first, and I read his last story just this week. Mm-hmm. It's a short. It's actually set in the far future, like genuinely, like the 30th century, and it was interesting in a few ways. I just thought I'd talk about it because we probably won't be discussing Robita again. So, I don't know. I like his work,
No,
but
I know.
it's
Yeah, fair
it's
enough.
not that influential.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
The part I thought was especially interesting was the section set in New York, which really, I mean, it was the 20s by that point, I think. So, Rabida was 80 at that time, but it felt like something out of Fifth Element. I mean, like New York is, giant skyscrapers and flying cars and all this stuff, and it's
Right.
like so noisy you can't hear yourself think. So I thought that was interesting. And there's a through line between his 1950s book where there's the student of the 1950s, which was which I mentioned earlier, where the main character invents a machine to do homework for the students, but the teacher finds out and he asks him to invent a machine to correct homework, and he never gets around to doing the machine to correct homework. And apparently they haven't invented that by the 30th century either, so that's a sort of running gag between books. So his books seem to take place in the same universe, I guess.
That's funny. Yeah.
So yeah, interesting author. Most of his books have been translated by this point.
Yeah.
So I've read I think 4 of them, but they're all really fun. They're very satirical.
Yeah.
Obviously dated elements, but
it is interesting that it's as you said at the beginning that it felt like a steampunk. In some ways it felt like a modern steampunk pastiche. It's true. It's got that kind of retro, and it's interesting that's always from French, like French comics and stuff. They like that whimsical steampunk kind of idea where it's all kind of ridiculous, and you see that in the 19th century, but all the way up to the present, where it's kind of something like Barbarella is almost like paying homage to that in outer space kind of thing, and it's the French whimsy, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, and this is
stories.
definitely whimsical, and the illustrations are great. I really like them.
Yeah.
Did you get a version with illustrations?
I did. Yeah, there was illustrations in my book.
Because Robita was just really good at sort of coming up with funny designs for machines, and especially in the 20th century books where he's got all this weird architecture, and like it's basically Victorian architecture but on stilts. Like there's apparently by the 1950s they get rid of the rule that nothing in France nothing around the Arc de Triomphe can be taller than it. So they actually build an international hotel on top of the Arc de Triomphe. So it's full of all sorts of stuff like that. Oh, I didn't mention the 20th century books have the most interesting thing probably about them that's mentioned. It has a Wikipedia article on it. The telephonoscope, which is Rabida predicting the television.
Okay.
It's basically a wall-mounted flat-screen television that you can watch plays live as they're shown from the theaters.
Yeah.
So not quite what TV was, but sort of interesting that. And it was a two-way sound. So the people in the audience clap, which I don't think Rabida thought about how that could be abused. Especially now we think about the internet. Anonymous comments and.
He didn't predict the rise of internet trolling in 1868.
1882, but
whatever.
But the telephonoscope is really interesting idea for 1882.
Yeah.
And I read another book that's set on Mars that has a similar thing where plays are broadcast into homes by a system of mirrors. So obviously the Victorians were thinking about television. They just didn't know how,
Well, I mean, literally, ancient Victorian-era magic tricks were performed with mirrors, as the famous saying goes. So that was probably like they found a way to do kind of a very primitive hologram with mirrors, as I recall. There were some famous magic tricks where they could make quote ghosts and spirits appear, and it was used like fog and smoke and mirrors, as they say. And so that may have been what they were thinking of when they did that kind of thing.
Robita never explains how the telephonoscope works precisely, but it's basically a flat screen television.
Right. Well, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they had the telegraph by that point.
Yep.
So they were kind of thinking along those lines. People felt like, it'd be great if we could have wireless communication, basically.
Yeah.
It may have just been, it'd be great if we could make this, and then obviously it's
But
useful.
it's just interesting that Victorians were thinking about that.
Yeah, yeah.
So a lot of forward thinking in those books, also with social issues, and also a lot of backwards, like stuff that didn't come true or stuff that he was overly hopeful about. But yeah, I really like this author, and I think I hope this adds to people thinking about him more.
Check it out, The Adventures of Saturnin Farandoul, folks, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, I think we're wrapping it up, right, Phil?
So once again, I've been Philip Rice, and with me was Adam Prosser. We both have Patreons, so one or hopefully both.
Yes.
If you sign up, you get to listen to the show a week early, plus other stuff. We both have comics that we release early. You release them early on the Patreon, right?
Yep.
Okay. Follow us on Twitter at Prankster36. That's Adam. And I am Spear Havoc. Or Spear Havoc. I don't even know how to pronounce it. It's a real word. But SpearHafoc_. So, yeah. Maybe I should have rethought that back when, but it was like 10 years ago. Anyway, so follow us there, and and on Instagram, and we would appreciate fan art if that's a thing you'd be interested in. We can repost them on Instagram or Facebook. We also have a Facebook page. So
it's Universe What Mad on Instagram.
Yeah. So we're all over the place. So like us all over the place. We would appreciate it. So to everyone on all 7 continents, the Lost Island at the North Pole, and all you crazy kids on Saturn, we'll see you all in the world to come.